salary of 18,000 a month, with benefits such as 1,000 rand cell phone allowance and all that. But what do these experiences or stories tell us? We must remember that the context therein is characterized by limited opportunities, and the state is the biggest employer. Now, both of these experiences tell us that there is a realization that resource allocation is restricted to the state, and there is that need to access it. The party therefore becomes a vehicle to access the state. And I mean, such analysis has been applied by people like Calvin Holt when he's looking at intra-elite violence. However, because of the competition, factional politics arises as a means to deal with such competition, which is in most cases for state resources. This is clear in Tando's experience, but Mlu even took it further and joined not a particular faction, but even went on to join another party. Now, this kind of stories, are so pervasive that councillors and many local activists I talked to confessed, to the difficulty of being elected if you don't have a group behind you to protect you. It therefore seems that there is an unofficial political system driven by material interest in which factional politics is key. As I mentioned again, there are several people who have begun using this kind of analysis, and Cow is one of them. The issue of unofficial political systems and local moral order, drawing from North Wallis Webb and Windust. Now, whilst material interests are central, I must say that ideological differences, or the supposed use of ideological differences, is also used to mask material interest, especially for the political elite, as they establish their patronage networks and accumulate wealth. So in this sense, what I'm saying is that the use of ideology has instrumental value. It's instrumental in this sense. But what are the implications of this? And I'm going to conclude on this note, that contrary to the ANC's position, and Gwede Mantashe has mentioned this on different fora, more formally in his organizational report at the Mangaung conference, he said that factions in the party have become institutionalized. But contrary to this, in reality they have not, and face little prospect of institutionalization because of their material basis. This means that they do not represent any social interest other than their own self-interest. Hence, they are constantly in flux. So there are likely to be negative implications for governance and for the party. For governance, the experiences or my research is telling me that factions organized along these lines, as in Buffalo City, are less responsive to social concerns since they are driven by individual concerns and networks. And the same kind of findings have been found in different contexts. So it's not a uniquely ANC phenomenon. Kim Belcher, in her research on factions of interest in Japan and Italy, also found the same thing. Now, as for the negative consequences for the party, internal democracy tends to be eroded away, as in Buffalo City, where factionalism has led to the proliferation of undemocratic internal political practices, such as party list manipulation, vote buying, and so forth. On that note, maybe let me end there, and maybe in the question and answer segment, we can always discuss about what it means when this kind of politics gets shifted or moves into the state. I thank you so much for your time.
Yes.
Thanks. Thanks, Tatenda, for the interesting presentation. I just wanted to ask, earlier on you mentioned the context of neoliberalism. I'm just wondering, it wasn't very clear to me how the neoliberal context links to factionalism in the case of Buffalo City.
Answer.
You want to take another?
Yeah, is there another one? Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Alfred. I liked your starting point, your context, and outlining of the historical considerations of events in the ANC, especially the Josiah commemorative group when it came back from the Soviet Union and talked of the New Jerusalem, which other people didn't like. But I want to submit that I think I want to submit that the factions, I mean, if you're talking about the ANC in particular, it's something that is natural. The ANC is described as a broad church, so it is a given. You've got communists there, you've got nationalists. It's a given. So, which means that it's ideological in the thing. But drawing two examples now, Tando and Mlu, you can see that Tando's considerations are, of course, his own personal circumstances. But Mlu is now drifting away to join another party. That's the reason you're having the likes of Hope and the FF today. It's an example of Mlu when people are closed out in the space within, then they feel that there's an opening outside. I wonder if you can just comment on that.
Thank you. Yeah, you want to get a mic there? Thanks.
My name is Brian. I just want to ask, do I think something in terms of the paper and the work, what advice would you give in terms of, for instance, the last year there is a person who works towards becoming a secretary and looking to get a position in government with local. So what suggestion do they give to the ruling party that it must, young people, they must work, they must educate themselves, not only focusing if they get this position, they must work, they must be in government. How about the issues that they focus on academics? And also the issue of making sure that the party it makes its members not to focus on the issue to join the party because of its preference.
Okay, let's give you something to go on.
Okay, thank you so much for the comments and questions. Tabang, the neoliberal context and how it fits into this. What I'm trying to do here is that, well, at the end of the day, people who engage in this kind, people who engage in factional politics are individuals who operate within the same socio-economic environment that all of us do. So I'm trying to say that the story that is happening around factionalism within the ANC should be read in conjunction with the other responses that society has been taking, that society has been taking in response to the neoliberal onslaught. So, like the story of Mlu and even Tando to some extent, some of these individuals, you get a sense that they are not inherently corrupt people who engage in factional politics because they're corrupt. What I'm trying to do is to bring the human element to how someone would react, would deal with their situation. And that's why I'm drawing that broader context. And I'm sort of, and this is debatable, we can discuss this. So what I'm trying to do is to position factionalism or to see it in the same light that people view the kind of strikes on the platinum belt, service delivery protest. And these are sort of expressions, or even though these are expressions of discontent to the situation, I'm trying to pick out how this neoliberal onslaught, how does it affect local politics? And that's why I'm drawing on it. Just to give a background to it, so that we can understand the basis of factionalism a bit better. Alfred, you mentioned that, look, factionalism is natural, it's a given, and that it is ideological, because you have communists and nationalists within the ANC. Now, what I'm trying to do here is that that line of thinking, it's there, and I concede to it. And I mentioned that, look, even if the media refers to factionalism in the same light, even some scholars, Susan Boysen, has also mentioned about the same thing. But one thing you must realize is that factionalism within the ANC and within the alliance hasn't been taken. They don't take easily to it. There's always been this tendency to portray a unified, mass-based organization. There's always that tendency, and dissent or factionalism is looked down upon, as something that is not right, because we're supposed to maintain this unified, mass-based organization. But then what I'm trying to do here is that if you had the same kind of factionalism as the PT party in Brazil has, it is institutionalized. So what they have is that even in the party's constitution, recognizes and caters for factions, because they know that people have different thoughts, within the organization. Within the ANC and its alliance, it's not like that. The level of institutionalization is different, and because of that, it leaves it vulnerable to the perpetuation of some of what I would call degenerative forms of factionalism. Taking on the example of the PT in Brazil, I think, in a sense, institutionalizing and formalizing in that sense can have a beneficial, effect, so to speak. For Brian, I don't know how I can answer you. You're asking me what kind of advice must I give to the ruling party and so forth. I guess the best thing I can possibly do, instead of being prescriptive to the ruling party, is that, and probably the paper will do that, hopefully in a better way, as I develop it, is to sort of identify the potential within the party, the potential for institutionalizing factions that are not necessarily based on material interest, because that is problematic. Yeah. So in that sense, maybe you could develop factions that are cooperative. In the PT example, they, instead of being degenerative, they are cooperative and actually help the party.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think there's a certain unity between factionalism, corruption, and all that manipulation that you're talking about. And that's the cult of self, concentration on the individual. And I think it's individualism which underlies the ideology of the neoliberals, and it's also the ideology which underlies much of current politics. So the concentration on self is often clad, as you've said so clearly, in some kind of spurious ideology, which has really no lasting characteristics, right? So the house of the faction is built on shifting sand and can be shifted. I think that the experience of the formation of COPE, for example, is very good example of how insecure the political and ideological foundation of that party actually was, actually is. And so we need to look, I think, a little deeper than your current account of this, to the fundamental motivation of the people, the actors on the stage of politics.
At the back.
Morning, Tatenda.
Mm.
Can you hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Tsepo Muroy, UK Fellow, Political Science. Now, I like the fact that you went back to history to give us context. But I'm a bit worried that you took us from the 30s onwards. Because for me, you're not going to do justice to ANC's analysis if you don't actually begin right at the beginning, 1910, 1911, 1912. Because if you're going to speak about divisions in the ANC and start linking it with factionalism, you need to go to the founding thinker, which is what happened to P.C.I. Sakasemi. You know that as the founding brains, he wasn't made the first president. Instead, it was John Rangelele, who was his uncle, by the way, which is very interesting if you actually go into the dynamics that went on there. But that's my first concern in your narrative, taking us back to its historicity of the ANC and factionalism. The second is you seem to be very romantic in your suggestion of factionalism being institutionalized and recognized at a constitutional level in the ANC. I think we need to be realistic here. Look, factionalism doesn't just happen. You know, and I think we also need to remind ourselves that we're living in a capitalist minute, where, as you say with your two examples of Mulu and the